Along the quiet waterways of New York, where canals once carried the lifeblood of commerce and ambition, there are places where the water no longer feels calm. Stone walls rise from dark currents, gates creak under unseen pressure, and locks that once lifted boats now seem to trap something far older beneath the surface. At night, the water does not simply flow. It listens. Locals speak in lowered voices about footsteps echoing on empty towpaths, lantern lights moving where no boats pass, and shapes that surface briefly before sinking back into the black depths. Some canal locks are abandoned. Others are still in use. But a few are said to be haunted. Travelers report whispers drifting across the water, hands brushing their ankles from below, and the feeling that something ancient is waiting for the gates to close. Tonight, we follow New York's historic canals into places where progress left scars, where tragedy soaked into stone, and where the water remembers every soul it claimed. If you found yourself alone beside a canal lock after midnight, and the gates began to move on their own, would you stay to watch or run before the water sealed you in? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe and comfortable, because what we are about to explore lies far from the warm glow of streetlights and familiar roads. New York's canals were once symbols of progress, carved through forests and farmland to connect cities, carry goods, and build fortunes. But beneath the calm surface of these waterways lies a darker history. Workers drowned during construction. Boats were crushed between gates. Families vanished while traveling narrow channels at night. Some canal towns thrived. Others faded away, leaving only stone locks, rusted mechanisms, and water that never truly rests. Visitors today speak of sudden cold air near the locks, voices calling from the water, and shadows moving where the moonlight should be clear. Some swear the locks still operate long after they were abandoned. Others say the water rises and falls on its own, as if guided by invisible hands. Before we step onto these towpaths, let me ask you something. If you heard your name whispered from beneath the surface of a silent canal, would you lean closer to Listina or would you walk away without looking back? Take a deep breath. And let us drift into the most haunted canal locks in New York, where the water never forgets. The lock lies quiet now, a massive chamber of stone and iron resting between slow-moving water and older earth. By day it appears functional and unremarkable, a place where boats rise and fall with mechanical patience. By night it becomes something else entirely, a hollow space where sound travels too far and shadows gather without explanation. Construction of the lock took far longer than planned. Delays mounted as accidents slowed progress and exhausted the workers. Equipment failed without clear cause. Foundations cracked and had to be reinforced again and again. Local rumors spread that the water resisted being controlled, that the river remembered its old paths and did not welcome walls. Officials dismissed the talk and pressed on, driven by deadlines and budgets. The chief engineer assigned to the project was known for precision and discipline. He walked the site daily, checking measurements, reviewing stonework, watching the gates rise inch by inch. To the crew he was distant but fair, a man who trusted numbers more than superstition. He often stayed late, lantern in hand, inspecting the lock chamber after the workers left, listening to the echo of his own footsteps against the stone. Rain had darkened the stone, and mist hung low over the water. The engineer was last seen descending toward the lock chamber alone, carrying his lantern and a folder of plans. When morning came, he was gone. His lantern was found near the edge of the chamber. The water below was calm. Search teams drained the lock as far as possible and combed every corner. They found no body, no clear sign of where he had gone. Official records listed the incident as a fall followed by an unrecovered drowning. Work resumed soon after, though many workers refused to stay after sunset from that day forward. When the lock finally opened, traffic moved through it smoothly. The river obeyed its new boundaries. Years passed, and the accident faded into a footnote. Yet those who worked near the lock late at night began to report strange sounds. Heavy footsteps echoed along the stone walls, slow and deliberate, as if someone were pacing the chamber floor. The sound carried even when the lock stood empty. Some nights, a faint light appeared above the water. It looked like a lantern glow, steady and pale, drifting just above the surface. Witnesses said it moved with purpose, tracing the length of the chamber before stopping suddenly in the center. Then it vanished, leaving only darkness and the quiet lap of water against stone. Maintenance crews learned to finish their tasks quickly after dusk. Boats passing through after dark reported an odd stillness, as if the lock were holding its breath. Voices seemed to fade inside the chamber, replaced by a pressure in the air that made people speak more softly without realizing why. Engines sounded muted, and even splashing water felt subdued. Engineers reviewing the structure decades later found nothing mechanically wrong. Stress tests showed no anomalies. The stonework remained solid. Yet temperature readings inside the chamber fluctuated without explanation at night, and sound recordings captured rhythmic impacts that did not match water movement or gate operation. Local residents told visitors that the lock was never truly finished. They said the engineer still walked his work, checking alignments no one else could see. The lantern, they claimed, marked the places where the stone did not sit quite right, where the water pressed harder than planned. To them, the pacing footsteps were not angry or violent. They were careful. Methodical. On particularly quiet nights, when fog settles thick over the river, the lantern glow appears brighter. It hovers just long enough for onlookers to feel watched, measured, as though someone were assessing their presence. Then the light fades, and the footsteps retreat into the walls. Historians note that many great structures carry stories like this, tales born from loss and long labor. They argue that exhaustion, darkness, and echoing stone can shape the mind into hearing what it expects. Still, none can fully explain why the footsteps follow a consistent path, or why the lantern always stops at the same point in the chamber before disappearing. Today, the lock remains in use, a vital link in the waterway. Tourists photograph its gates by day, admiring the craftsmanship and scale. Few linger after sunset. Those who do often leave with a quiet unease, a sense that the structure is aware of them in ways they cannot see. The water continues to rise and fall within its walls, obedient and contained. Yet beneath the surface, something seems unfinished. A presence remains, bound to stone and water, walking the lock that cost him his life. In the darkness, the engineer's work goes on, measured in footsteps and fading light, ensuring that the river never forgets the price of control. Widow's Gate Lock stands where water once decided the fate of an entire town. The canal cuts through the land like a scar that never healed. Its surface is calm now, reflecting gray skies and drifting leaves, but beneath that stillness lies the memory of movement, of force, of water that refused to be contained. Long ago, a canal town grew here because of the lock. Barges carried grain, timber, and iron through its gates. Houses clustered close to the banks. Shops opened at dawn and closed by lantern light. Life followed the rhythm of the water rising and falling, the gates opening and sealing shut. Floods came slowly at first. Seasonal swelling that locals learned to respect. But each year the water climbed higher. The canal walls cracked. The lock strained under pressure it was never designed to hold. Still, people stayed. This was their home, their livelihood, their past and future bound to the water. The worst flood arrived without warning. Rain fell for days upstream, unseen by the town until the canal surged with unnatural speed. The lock was closed too late. Water slammed against the gates, shaking the iron and stone. Homes nearest the canal were swallowed first. Streets turned into currents. Lanterns vanished beneath the surface one by one. By morning, the town was broken. The canal was rerouted years later, leaving the lock isolated and unused, standing beside reeds and mud where voices once filled the air. The town slowly faded from maps, then from memory, until only the lock remained as proof that anyone had lived there at all. Locals call it Widow's Gate Lock. They say the name came from a woman who waited there during the flood, refusing to leave. Her husband had gone to secure their boat, promising to return. When the flood receded, the boat was found downstream, shattered. Her husband was never recovered. After that night, people claimed the lock was no longer empty. Visitors describe arriving during quiet hours, when fog settles low over the water and sound carries too far. The iron gates loom taller than expected, their surfaces streaked with rust and water stains shaped like long, downward trails. Even in daylight, the air feels heavy, as if the canal itself is holding its breath. Then there is the sound. A soft sobbing, barely louder than the water slipping through narrow gaps. Some think it is the wind moving through old mechanisms. Others say it happens on still nights when the air does not move at all. Those who linger feel it most strongly. A sensation of presence settles behind them, close enough to raise the hairs on the back of the neck. Not hostile. Not urgent. Simply there. People turn instinctively, expecting to see another visitor standing too close, only to find empty ground and quiet water. Many leave quickly after that. The lock has been inspected over the years by engineers and historians. They find nothing unusual beyond age and neglect. The mechanisms no longer function. The canal water here leads nowhere. Yet equipment fails more often at this site than at others nearby. Batteries drain. Recording devices capture only faint, uneven static when pointed toward the gates. At night, reflections behave strangely. The water mirrors shapes that do not exist above it. Shadows stretch across the surface even when nothing stands to cast them. Some swear they see the outline of a woman near the edge. Head bowed, motionless, until the ripples distort her form and she vanishes. No one has ever claimed to see her face clearly. The surrounding land has reclaimed much of the old town. Foundations lie hidden beneath grass. A few stone steps lead nowhere. After heavy rain, pieces of pottery and wood sometimes surface along the banks, reminders pulled briefly back into view before sinking again. The lock remains untouched, protected not by law but by unease. Fishermen avoid it. Boaters pass silently. Children are warned not to wander near the gates, not with stories, but with firm instructions and nervous glances toward the water. Not with stories, but with firm instructions and nervous glances toward the water. There is a sense that the lock listens. That it remembers footsteps on stone, hands gripping cold iron, voices calling out names that were never answered. The canal carried away a town, but it left behind its waiting. Widow's Gate Lock does not threaten. It does not chase or cry out. It simply endures, standing between what once was and what the water claimed. The sobbing fades when approached, as if retreating inward, deeper into memory. Those who leave often look back without knowing why. The gates stand closed, rusted, patient. The canal flows past them, indifferent and quiet, carrying only reflections and the weight of what was lost. Some places do not need ruins to feel haunted. Some need only silence, water, and the echo of someone who never stopped waiting. The canal looks ordinary at first glance, a long ribbon of water bordered by stone walls darkened by age and moisture. Barges pass through daily, engines humming steadily, ropes creaking softly against metal rails. Yet as boats approach the black current lock, the color of the water begins to change. What was once reflective and pale turns dense and shadowed, as if the canal itself is deepening without reason. The darkness does not spread outward like ink. It remains contained, perfectly shaped within the lock chamber, ignoring wind, rain, and passing wakes. Even on bright afternoons, when sunlight strikes the water directly, the surface absorbs the light instead of reflecting it. The lock becomes a pool of muted black, heavy and still. Boaters often describe the first sensation as resistance. Engines work harder. The vibration beneath their feet deepens. The vessel seems to slow, not from mechanical failure, but as if something unseen is pressing gently against the hull. Ropes feel heavier when handled. Even voices sound quieter, as though the air itself has thickened. The lock gates close behind with their usual echoing clang, but the sound lingers longer than expected, vibrating through the stone and fading unevenly. Water levels begin to rise or fall as designed, yet the surface remains strangely calm. Ripples flatten quickly. Reflections blur and vanish. The canal appears to hold its breath. Old records suggest this lock was built over a natural depression in the riverbed, a place where currents once collided and churned unpredictably. Engineers reinforced the foundations repeatedly, concerned about erosion that never appeared at the surface. Below the stone, the water seemed to move differently, circling instead of flowing onward. Those who have worked the lock for years avoid lingering near the edge. They speak quietly of moments when the water does not behave as water should. A dropped tool fails to splash. A falling leaf disappears without trace. On rare occasions, something else is seen. Hands. They rise slowly, pale against the dark surface, fingers spread as if searching for air. They never break the surface fully. There is no splash, no ripple, no disturbance at all. The hands appear, remain for a heartbeat, and then sink back into the black without leaving any sign they were ever there. Witnesses disagree on details. Some say the hands are small, others say large and weathered. Some report many at once, others only one. Yet all agree on one thing. The water remains perfectly still. Stories spread among crews and night watchmen. Tales of boats that stalled completely, drifting aimlessly until the gates opened again. Accounts of sudden cold radiating upward through the deck, numbing feet and legs. A few speak of faint pressure against the hull, not like an impact, but like something leaning, listening. The lock has never claimed a vessel outright. No official accidents mark its history. No names are carved into memorial plaques. Yet logbooks show odd gaps in time. A passage that should take minutes sometimes lasts far longer. Watches disagree. Clocks drift behind or ahead after passing through. At night, the lock appears even darker. The surrounding canal reflects stars and distant lights, but the black current swallows them whole. Moonlight touches the stone walls and fades before reaching the water. In silence, the surface looks less like liquid and more like an opening, deep and patient. Some believe the lock traps pockets of older water, layers untouched by flow, carrying memories of what once sank there. Others suggest underground currents still spiral beneath the stone, pulling downward without movement above. Engineers find no faults. Instruments detect no abnormal depth. Still, those who pass through often feel watched. The sensation is subtle. A tightening in the chest. A sudden awareness of balance, of weight, of breath. People glance down without knowing why, then quickly look away. No one leans over the edge for long. When the gates finally open and the vessel moves on, the water lightens behind them. The resistance fades. Engines return to normal rhythm. Conversation resumes, though often more quietly. Many crews mark the moment by habit, adjusting ropes or checking gauges, grounding themselves in routine. Yet later, far downstream, some report damp handprints on railings or deck boards. The marks are cold to the touch and vanish within minutes. Others wake from sleep recalling the slow rise of fingers through dark water, reaching but never touching. The black current lock remains in operation, unchanged, unremarked in official documents. It performs its function flawlessly, lifting and lowering boats as it always has. No warnings are posted. No barriers are added. To the outside world, it is just another passage in a working canal. But those who have crossed it know better. They know that for a brief stretch of water, movement obeys different rules. That beneath the calm surface, something waits, neither alive nor gone, held in endless suspension. And every time the lock fills, every time the gates close, the darkness gathers quietly once more, ready for the next vessel to slow, to listen, and to pass through. Iron jaw lock rises from the water like a frozen mouth, its steel lips parted just wide enough to remind visitors what it was built to do. During the day, it appears ordinary. Concrete walls stained by decades of tides. Bolts rusted into dark halos. Water slipping through in slow, obedient lines. Boats pass nearby with no awareness of the weight pressing into the structure. Yet even in sunlight, there is a sense that the lock is waiting rather than resting. The lock was engineered in an era when force mattered more than mercy. Early designs favored strength over precision. Gates were thick, unforgiving slabs of iron driven by primitive hydraulics. Operators relied on timing and instinct, not sensors or automated fail-safes. When everything worked, the lock functioned as intended. When it did not, the consequences were immediate. Records from its earliest years describe incidents that were never meant for the public eye. Barges misaligned by inches. Ropes snapping under sudden pressure. Hulls crushed when gates closed faster than expected. Metal screamed against metal, and water surged where it should have remained calm. The lock did not pause. It did not correct itself. It simply finished what it started. Workers learned to fear certain sounds. A low vibration in the floor plates meant the gates were moving unevenly. A sharp echo through the chamber warned that pressure was building too fast. There were moments when men ran, not from water, but from the machinery itself. After each accident, repairs were made. Reinforcements added. Procedures rewritten. Yet the lock remained the same at its core. A machine designed to bite down with absolute certainty. As decades passed, technology improved. New locks were built elsewhere, smoother and quieter. Iron jaw lock was downgraded, then partially retired. Its gates were sealed into an inactive position. Officially, it no longer operated. Officially, it no longer posed a threat. Night tells a different story. After sunset, the air around the lock changes. Sounds travel farther. Footsteps echo with strange clarity. Visitors often report hearing grinding metal long after operations have ceased. The noise is deep and deliberate, like teeth being tested. Maintenance crews insist there is no power running through the system. No hydraulics engaged. Yet the sound returns. Slow. Rhythmic. Patient. Standing near the edge, people feel vibrations beneath their feet. Not the light tremble of passing traffic, but a steady pulse rising from below. The concrete seems to hum, as if something massive is shifting in the dark water beneath the gates. Some describe the sensation as pressure rather than motion, as though the structure remembers how it once closed and still prepares itself to do so again. The water inside the chamber behaves strangely at night. Ripples form without wind. Reflections bend and stretch across the surface, distorting the shape of the gates. Lights from the shore appear to sink, dragged downward by unseen currents. No alarms sound. No warnings appear. Only the quiet certainty that the lock is not entirely dormant. Engineers who study old infrastructure speak of material memory. Metal that has endured repeated stress can respond in subtle ways long after forces are removed. Expansion and contraction. Residual tension. Micro movements too small to measure but large enough to feel. Iron jaw lock, built to endure extreme pressure, holds more of that memory than most structures ever will. There are also the human memories tied into its walls. Fear leaves marks that do not fade easily. Each accident, each near miss, each moment of panic was absorbed into the place. Over time, stories replaced reports. Whispers replaced warnings. The lock earned its name not from official records, but from those who worked beside it and survived. Today, visitors arrive out of curiosity. They walk along the edge, listening, waiting. Some laugh at first. Some grow quiet without realizing why. Few stay long after dark. Fewer still step close enough to feel the vibration when it begins. Those who do describe the same sensation. A feeling of being measured. Of standing where something larger is deciding whether to move. The lock does not need to operate to feel alive. It only needs to remember. Iron jaw lock no longer crushes boats. Its gates no longer close on command. But the structure remains what it always was. A machine built to swallow, shaped by force, and defined by pressure. In silence, it holds that purpose intact. As the night deepens, the grinding sound fades and returns again, never rushing, never stopping completely. Water laps against iron. Concrete carries the echo upward. The lock waits, not for power or permission, but for the weight it once knew. And those who feel it beneath their feet understand that some places never forget what they were built to do. The canal lock rests in a bend of water where the towpath narrows and disappears beneath weeds and nettles. Grass pushes through cracked stone, and the air carries the quiet scent of damp earth and rusted iron. At dusk it becomes something else, a threshold where sound and shadow behave in unfamiliar ways. The towpath once guided horses that pulled barges at a steady walking pace. Hooves pressed the ground smooth, and ropes cut pale lines through the air. Now the path lies uneven, broken by roots and pooled rainwater. The canal itself remains calm, a long dark mirror that reflects the sky even when clouds gather. The lock gates stand partly open, their timbers swollen and scarred by decades of water. As evening deepens, the first sound arrives before anything can be seen. Footsteps echo along the towpath, measured and steady, neither hurried nor slow. The rhythm matches the pace of a person walking, yet the path ahead remains empty. Leaves do not stir, and the grass does not bend. The sound feels close, always just beyond sight. Visitors often pause at this moment, listening for an explanation. Some expect another walker to emerge from the curve of the canal. Others assume an animal moves through the brush. The footsteps continue, maintaining the same distance, as if following a rule that cannot be broken. When a visitor steps forward, the sound advances as well. When a visitor stops, the sound fades into silence. Light changes quickly near the lock. The sun sinks behind trees, and long shadows stretch across the water. These shadows do not remain fixed. They slide along the towpath, keeping pace with anyone who walks beside the canal. They do not cross into the water or climb the lock walls. They remain parallel, always present, never touching. The lock chamber holds a colder air, even in summer. Stone walls rise from the water, darkened by moss and age. Marks from old repairs remain visible, lines and patches where hands once worked to keep the canal alive. The water inside the chamber is still, disturbed only by drifting leaves. Reflections bend and ripple in ways that make distances difficult to judge. Those who linger report a growing awareness of being observed. It is not a gaze that can be felt on the skin, but a quiet pressure, as if attention itself has weight. Barges queued here, and crews waited their turn, sharing news and weather. When the canal traffic ended, silence replaced these sounds. Nature reclaimed the path, but something of the old rhythm remained, echoing in the space left behind. As night approaches, the footsteps return, clearer now, echoing off stone and water. If a visitor turns around, expecting to see someone behind, there is only the empty path and the leaning grass. The sound does not retreat. It simply resumes its place, matching pace as before. Shadows lengthen until they merge with darkness. At this hour, the loch feels suspended between times. The water reflects stars and passing clouds, while the towpath fades into a narrow ribbon of pale earth. The parallel shadows remain visible even when the ground itself is hard to see, darker shapes moving within the dark. Some visitors attempt to test the presence. They stop suddenly, step off the path, or change direction. The shadows adjust without hesitation, maintaining their alignment. The footsteps pause and resume with the same precision. There is no sign of confusion, no delay that suggests a living follower. The response feels automatic, governed by the place itself. The experience reaches its height when a visitor leaves the loch behind. As the towpath curves away and the loch slips out of view, the sounds begin to thin. Footsteps lose their echo and then fall silent. Shadows dissolve into the general darkness of the landscape. The pressure of attention lifts, leaving only the night air and the distant call of insects. Those who look back often feel a final pull, a sense that something remains watching from the edge of the loch chamber. The water lies smooth again, reflecting nothing unusual. The path ahead opens and widens, returning to an ordinary trail. The canal becomes just a canal, quiet and still. In daylight, the towpath shadow loch offers no sign of its nighttime behavior. Sunlight fills the chamber, and birds rest on the gate beams. The path appears empty and harmless. Yet the memory of footsteps and moving shadows lingers with those who have walked there after sunset. The place does not chase, warn, or speak. It simply mirrors movement, as if preserving the memory of all who once passed along the towpath. In doing so, it transforms a forgotten loch into a living echo. A reminder that some locations do not let go of their past. They walk beside it, step for step, until the path finally turns away. Coldwater Rise Loch sits at a bend in the canal where the land dips and the water deepens without obvious reason. From a distance it looks ordinary, a functional structure of stone, steel, and slow-moving gates. Yet anyone who spends time nearby notices that the air feels different here, heavier and sharper, as if the water carries its own breath. The loch was built to manage an uneven stretch of canal where sudden depth changes once caused frequent groundings. Engineers designed it to regulate water flow smoothly, raising and lowering vessels with careful precision. In practice, the water behaved unpredictably from the moment the loch became operational. Boaters were the first to report irregular changes. Without warning, the water level would rise or fall several inches. Even when the gates remained closed. Instruments showed no mechanical failure. Valves were sealed. Control panels displayed normal readings. Still, the water shifted as if responding to something unseen. Those waiting near the loch during these events described an intense chill that swept through the chamber. It was not the gradual cool of evening or the damp cold common to waterways. People spoke of their skin tightening, of fog forming briefly around their hands before dissolving again. Maintenance crews investigated repeatedly. They tested temperature gradients and underground currents. They mapped the canal bed and searched for hidden inlets. Reports concluded that Coldwater Rise sat above an unusually deep pocket of groundwater, fed by old springs. The explanation was reasonable, yet it failed to account for the timing and force of the cold air bursts. As months passed, more unsettling observations emerged. They dismissed them as shifting reflections or clusters of weeds. But on clear days, when the water lay flat and dark, some claimed to see faces below, pale and distorted by depth, staring upward. Descriptions of these faces varied, yet shared unsettling similarities. Mouths slightly open, as if frozen mid-breath. They appeared just long enough to be recognized, then faded into ripples that spread without a visible cause. No bubbles rose. Nothing broke the surface. Local history offered little comfort. Long before the canal existed, this stretch of land was known for cold springs that never froze in winter. Old maps marked the area as unstable ground. Early settlers avoided building homes nearby, noting that livestock refused to drink from the water at certain times of year. When the canal was cut through the land, workers encountered pockets of icy water that surged unexpectedly from below. Several near accidents were recorded, including sudden drops in footing when the ground softened beneath cold flow. Official logs mentioned delays and revisions, but no lasting hazards were recorded after completion. Still, the lock continued to behave strangely. Boaters reported engines stalling within the chamber, as if the cold dampened more than metal. Voices sounded hollow and distant, even when spoken loudly. Some felt watched, not from the banks, but from below the waterline. On particularly still mornings, mist formed only above the lock, clinging to the surface. While the surrounding canal remained clear. The mist drifted low and thin, curling inward toward the center of the chamber. Standing within it, people felt that same sudden cold, sharper than before, accompanied by a pressure behind the eyes. Engineers insisted that the lock was safe. Data showed no structural instability. Water fluctuations, while unusual, remained within tolerances. The cold air bursts were attributed to temperature inversion and groundwater displacement. Official explanations satisfied regulations, but they did not settle the unease felt by those who worked there. Stories spread quietly among locals. Some said the faces belonged to those who had drowned in the spring centuries earlier, long before records were kept. Others believed the lock had disturbed something preserved in cold and darkness, something that noticed when the water was forced to rise and fall. At night, the lock grows quieter than expected. Insects fall silent. The usual movement of water seems to pause between cycles. Standing near the edge, one can feel the cold gather without warning. Rolling upward like a tide made of air. The surface below remains smooth, reflecting nothing clearly. A few witnesses claim that during these moments, the faces appear again, clearer than before. They rise just beneath the surface, aligned in no pattern, all gazing upward. The water does not break. The images vanish as soon as the cold recedes, leaving behind only faint ripples that spread toward the walls. Despite everything, Coldwater Rise Lock remains in operation. Boats pass through daily. The gates open and close with steady rhythm. Most travelers notice nothing unusual. And that normality is perhaps what makes the rare moments so disturbing. The lock works, yet it never feels settled. Those who linger too long often leave with a lingering chill that follows them for hours. They speak less, move faster, and avoid looking back at the water. Whatever lies beneath Coldwater Rise remains unseen, yet its presence is felt in every sudden shift, every breath of freezing air, and every quiet moment when the water seems to watch from below. Lantern Drift Lock lies along a narrow stretch of canal where water bends tightly between stone walls and overhanging trees. During its working years, this place was known for light rather than shadow. Old iron lanterns once lined the banks and gates, their warm glow guiding boats through the tight passage after sunset. Boatmen trusted those lights. They marked safe water, shallow edges, and the exact moment when gates would open or close. Without them, navigating the lock at night was nearly impossible. The canal was busy then. Cargo moved steadily through the region, and the lock became a vital checkpoint. Lantern keepers were assigned to maintain the lights, trimming wicks, refilling oil, and ensuring that every glow was visible through fog and rain. Their work followed strict routines. At dusk, the lights came alive. At dawn, they were extinguished. Over time, traffic slowed. Roads replaced water routes, and the lock fell quiet. The lanterns were removed, their posts left bare and rusting. The lock remained, but its purpose faded into memory. Locals assumed darkness had fully claimed the place. They were wrong. The first report surfaced years after the last lantern was taken down. A night traveler crossing the towpath noticed a faint glow hovering above the water. Others began to notice similar sights. Floating points of light appeared on calm nights, drifting slowly along the canal surface. They moved with intention rather than current, pausing near the lock gates. Or clustering briefly before separating again. The lights never reflected clearly on the water. They hovered just above it, steady and quiet. When approached, they faded. No sudden flash. No movement away. Simply a gradual dimming. Until the canal was left in complete darkness. Deeper and heavier than ordinary night. Travelers described the moment as disorienting. As if their sense of distance vanished along with the light. The lock itself seemed unchanged, but the atmosphere shifted after sunset. Sounds carried oddly. Footsteps echoed longer than expected. The soft movement of water against stone felt amplified. Filling the silence left behind when the lights disappeared. Some locals believe the lights are remnants of the old lanterns. Echoes of a system that once protected countless journeys. Others speak of accidents that occurred here when visibility failed. Boats struck stone. Men fell into cold water. In a narrow lock, mistakes were unforgiving. Records mention several night incidents, though details are sparse. Lost cargo. Damaged hulls. At least one disappearance during a fog-heavy crossing, never fully explained. Modern inspections offer no clear answers. Electrical interference has been ruled out. There are no power sources nearby. Wildlife explanations fail to account for the light's steady hover and synchronized fading. Even weather patterns do not fully explain the sightings, which occur in clear conditions as often as misty ones. Those who have seen the lights agree on one detail. They feel guided at first. The glow creates a sense of direction, a subtle reassurance that the canal is navigable, that the path ahead is visible. For a brief moment, it feels safe to follow. Some travelers admit taking a step toward the water before stopping themselves, unsettled by the sudden urge. Then the light fades. Darkness closes in quickly, swallowing edges and depth. The canal becomes a flat, black surface with no reference points. People describe a strong awareness of their surroundings during that moment, every sound sharpened, every movement cautious. Afterward, many choose to leave immediately. Equipment behaves unpredictably near the lock at night. Flashlights flicker. Phone screens dim unexpectedly. Cameras record uneven exposure, as if light is being absorbed rather than reflected. Footage rarely captures the floating glow clearly. When it does, the image blurs moments before the light disappears. The towpath shows signs of age but no unusual markings. The old lantern posts remain, empty and silent, their purpose long gone. During the day, Lantern Drift Lock looks ordinary, almost peaceful. Water passes through slowly. Birds perch along the stones. Nothing suggests unease. It is only after sunset that the canal remembers what it used to be. Some believe the lights appear as a warning rather than a lure. A reminder that this passage was once dangerous and should not be crossed carelessly. Others think they mark unfinished journeys, movements that never reached their destination. The lock does not tell its story openly. It offers only brief illumination, then silence. A moment of guidance followed by absence. Those who encounter the lights often reflect on how quickly they trusted them, and how deeply unsettling it felt when that trust was removed. Lantern Drift Lock remains unused, its gates fixed in place, its water flowing without purpose. The floating lights continue to appear without pattern or announcement, repeating a ritual older than the darkness around them. When the last glow fades, the canal is left exactly as it was meant to be. Quiet. Narrow. Unforgiving. And waiting. The canal narrows as it approaches Stone Throat Lock, the walls drawing closer until water and stone seem pressed together. From above, the chamber looks like a vertical corridor cut deep into the earth, its masonry darkened by decades of moisture and passing boats. Sound behaves differently here, bending and stretching as if the lock itself is listening. Engines idle lower as vessels enter. Footsteps echo sharply, multiplied and return from unexpected angles. A single cough rebounds several times before fading, each repetition slightly altered. The stone does not absorb sound. It carries it, holds it, and then gives it back. Boat crews often fall silent without realizing why. Conversations taper off. Even casual laughter feels misplaced. The chamber seems to tighten around noise, compressing every word until it feels heavier than it should. When the gates close, the final clang rings longer than expected, lingering in the air like a held breath. Stone Throat Lock was built with efficiency in mind, its walls thick and closely spaced to conserve space and control water levels precisely. Engineers praised its acoustics in early reports, noting how clearly commands could be heard from end to end. A lock keeper hearing his name spoken when no one was nearby. A crewman certain he heard an argument echoing from the stone, one that sounded decades old. Fragments only. Half sentences. Familiar tones without visible speakers. As years passed, the stories became more specific. Voices were not random. Then a clearer sound emerges, shaped like speech but without direction. The voice is theirs. Not spoken aloud, but thought. A passing worry. A remembered regret. A question never answered. The stone walls repeat it softly, then again, altering the rhythm slightly each time, as if testing the sound. No two experiences are exactly the same. One person hears a reminder of something forgotten. Another hears a phrase from childhood, spoken in a tone long gone. The lock does not shout. It whispers, close enough to feel personal. Those unfamiliar with the phenomenon often turn suddenly, searching for a companion who must have spoken. They find only stone and water. They learn not to react. Silence is safer. Routine is protection. There are moments, however, when silence is broken without consent. A visitor might think a thought and hear it answered, not with new words, but with repetition. The lock does not argue or explain. It reflects. It takes what is given and returns it unchanged, stripped of context, raw and exposed. Some believe the stone has absorbed generations of sound, layered into the walls through constant vibration. Others suggest the narrow design traps echoes in looping paths, replaying fragments endlessly. Measurements and tests reveal nothing unusual. The stone appears ordinary. The acoustics defy explanation. At night, Stone Throat Lock is rarely used, but when it is, the effect intensifies. Darkness removes visual grounding, leaving only sound. A whispered phrase can seem inches from the ear. Footsteps may echo before they occur, as if anticipated. There are reports of visitors covering their ears, only to find the voices continuing inside their heads, spoken aloud by the stone. The boundary between thought and sound blurs. Breathing becomes deliberate. Time stretches. Yet the lock has never harmed anyone. No physical danger has been recorded. The experience ends when the gates open and the vessel moves on. The voices fade, trailing off into indistinct murmurs that dissolve into the open canal. Downstream, people often struggle to recall exactly what they heard. The words slip away, leaving only the feeling that something private was briefly made public. Others feel unsettled, guarded, quieter for days. Stone Throat Lock remains part of the canal's daily operation, unmarked and unaltered. To most, it is simply a narrow passage of stone and water. But for those who pass through attentively, it is something else entirely. It is a place where sound remembers. Where walls listen. Where thoughts, once formed, may not remain silent. And every time the gates close, the stone throat tightens once more, waiting patiently to speak again. Broken chain lock sits quietly along the canal, its silhouette barely visible against the water. By daylight it appears unremarkable, a practical structure built for control and passage. Stone edges softened by weather. Metal fixtures dulled by time. Nothing about it suggests danger, and nothing warns of what once happened there. Decades ago, this lock depended on a heavy chain to regulate movement. The chain was thick, forged to endure strain and weight, trusted without question. It connected gate to mechanism, holding everything in balance. Workers passed by it every day, their hands brushing the links, their boots echoing along the platform. Confidence in the chain became routine, and routine became silence. On a calm afternoon, that silence ended. Records describe a routine operation interrupted by sudden failure. The chain snapped without warning, its links breaking under pressure they had carried too many times before. The release was violent. Metal recoiled. Gates shifted unpredictably. The force moved faster than any person could react. When the motion stopped, the water was still, but everything else had changed. The accident left a permanent mark on the lock and on those who witnessed it. Repairs were made quickly. A new chain installed. Safety protocols updated. Over time, the event was reduced to a brief entry in maintenance logs, then quietly forgotten by all but a few. The lock continued to function, and life moved forward. But broken chain lock did not forget. At night, the atmosphere around the water thickens. Sounds carry farther across the surface, stretched thin by darkness. Long after midnight, visitors report hearing the scrape of metal dragging slowly along stone. The sound is steady and deliberate, as if a heavy chain is being pulled across the lock floor. There is no visible movement. No machinery running. Yet the echo persists, sliding across the water and returning again. Those standing near the edge feel an unease that is difficult to name. The air seems heavier, pressing inward. The water reflects light in broken patterns, refusing to settle into stillness. Even when the night is calm, faint ripples move outward from the lock chamber, tracing circles that fade and reappear. Some people experience a sudden sensation at the edge of the platform. A brief tug at a sleeve. A pull at the hem of a jacket. The feeling lasts only a moment. Like a hand testing its grip. Most instinctively step back. Their heart quickening before their mind catches up. Nothing is there. No wind. No visible cause. Engineers speak of residual motion, of structures that respond to past stress. Chains under repeated load can stretch, contract, and fail long before their limits are visible. When they break, the energy has nowhere to go. It disperses into metal, stone, and water. Broken chain lock absorbed that release, and over time, it learned its rhythm. The replacement chain installed after the accident remains intact, its links smooth and secure. Inspections show no damage. Measurements show no movement. Yet the old chain, removed and discarded, seems to have left something behind. A pattern. A memory. A tension that resurfaces when the world grows quiet. Maintenance crews avoid working here at night when they can. Not out of fear, they insist, but out of respect for the place. They speak of tools vibrating slightly when set down. Of footsteps sounding closer than they should. Of the dragging noise that stops the moment someone shines a light toward the water. Visitors often underestimate broken chain lock. They arrive expecting a story frozen in the past, a structure stripped of meaning by time. They linger until the sound reaches them, slow and unmistakable. Some leave immediately. Others stay, drawn by the need to understand what they are hearing. Standing at the edge, one becomes aware of how narrow the boundary truly is. Stone meets water. Safety meets depth. The lock exists to control that boundary, to hold chaos in place. When the chain failed, that control slipped for just a moment. The consequences of that moment remain embedded in every surface. As the night deepens, the dragging sound returns once more, softer now, almost careful. The water shifts slightly, responding as it always has. The lock does not threaten. It does not warn. It simply repeats what it remembers. Broken chain lock no longer relies on the chain that once failed. Its systems are modern, its operation precise. Yet the memory of sudden release lingers. Those who feel the tug understand it is not an invitation, but a reminder. Some forces do not vanish when repaired. They settle into place, waiting for silence to bring them back. The lock sits at the edge of Milltown where the canal bends and the water deepens without warning. Stone walls rise from the surface, worn smooth by decades of use. And the basin below them appears darker than the surrounding channel. Even on bright days, light seems to hesitate here, as if the water absorbs more than it reflects. Long ago, this lock served the mill that gave the town its name. Grain carts rattled over the nearby bridge. And barges queued patiently, waiting to pass through. The water flowed with purpose then, controlled by gates and schedules. Lifting and lowering cargo with steady precision. When the mill closed, the rhythm changed. The gates were used less often, and maintenance slowed. Silt gathered along the edges, and weeds crept between the stones. What remained constant was the depth. The basin beneath the lock stayed unusually deep. Its floor uneven, shaped by old currents and forgotten repairs. Locals speak quietly about what followed. Accidents happened here. Spread across different years. Separated by long stretches of calm. A slip near the edge. A moment of lost footing. A shadow misjudged at dusk. The canal took more than one life. Always without spectacle. Always with the same still surface afterward. The water at the sink lock behaves strangely even now. On days when the canal is calm elsewhere. The basin stirs. Slow spirals form near the center, turning with no visible cause. Leaves and floating debris drift inward, circling before settling again. There is no sound of rushing water. No open gate to explain the movement. Standing near the edge brings an uneasy awareness. The swirl does not pull strongly, yet it never fully stops. It feels patient, like a habit the water cannot break. The surface appears closer than it truly is. As evening approaches, the town around the lock grows quiet. Shops close, doors shut, and the narrow streets empty. Lights fade one by one until only a few windows glow in the distance. The canal path remains open, a thin line of pale gravel beside dark water. It is during these quiet hours that another sound is sometimes heard. Laughter drifts along the canal, light and playful, rising and falling as if carried on a breeze. The sound is unmistakably youthful, brief bursts of joy that echo gently off the stone walls. Yet the path remains empty. And the town behind lies silent. Those who hear it often stop walking, unsure whether to continue. The laughter does not seem distant, nor does it feel close. It hovers over the water, moving slowly from one end of the loch to the other. There is no urgency in it, no sign of distress. Only the simple sound of children at play. Some listeners describe the laughter as fading when they step closer to the basin. Others say it grows clearer for a moment, then breaks apart, scattering across the canal like ripples. No voices follow it. No footsteps accompany the sound. It arrives and leaves without explanation. The loch itself feels colder at night. Stone holds the chill, and moisture gathers along the walls. The swirling water reflects fragments of sky and shadow, creating shifting patterns that seem almost deliberate. The sense of being watched does not come from above or behind, but from below the surface. History gives the place its weight. Generations passed through this loch, trusting it as part of daily life. The canal fed the mill, and the mill fed the town. When that purpose ended, the structure remained, holding on to memories without the movement that once defined it. Visitors who linger often feel an urge to step back from the edge, guided by instinct rather than fear. The water does not threaten, yet it demands respect. The swirl continues its slow rotation, indifferent to presence, indifferent to time. As night deepens, the laughter sometimes returns, softer now, blending with the faint sounds of water against stone. It feels less like a call and more like an echo, as though the canal itself remembers moments of life and play that once touched its surface. Leaving the sink loch brings a noticeable shift. The path widens, the water grows calmer, and the uneasy tension lifts. Sounds return to normal, replaced by insects and distant wind. Looking back, the loch appears unchanged, a quiet structure holding dark water. In daylight, Milltown's sink loch reveals nothing unusual. The swirl is gentler, barely noticeable. Sunlight warms the stones, and birds perch along the gate beams. Children pass by on bicycles, laughing in ways that sound entirely ordinary. Yet those who have stood there in the evening remember the difference. They recall water that moved without reason and laughter that came from nowhere. The loch remains, not as a warning, but as a reminder that some places carry the imprint of what they have witnessed. The canal continues its slow journey through the town. And life moves on around it. But beneath the still surface of the sink loch, motion never fully rests. It turns quietly, holding echoes of the past. Waiting for night to fall again. Fogfall Loch rests in a shallow valley where the canal narrows and the land slopes inward, as if guiding air and water toward the same quiet center. From the outside it looks sturdy and well maintained, its gates rising from stone walls darkened by age and moisture. Yet mist gathers here regardless of season or forecast, forming even under clear skies and warm sun. The loch stands in full view, edges sharp and defined. The fog appears without warning. One moment the loch stands in full view. The next, a pale curtain drifts down, softening every line and swallowing distance. It rolls in low and steady, never rushing, never swirling violently. It simply settles, as though this place has learned how to hold it. Engineers attribute the fog to a unique convergence of water temperature and air pressure. Cold currents flow beneath the loch, while warmer air passes overhead. The explanation satisfies diagrams and reports, but it does not explain why the mist forms even during drought, or why it lingers long after conditions change. Those who work near Fogfall Loch describe the fog as unusually dense. Sound behaves differently within it. Footsteps echo and then fade too quickly. Voices seem to lose direction, returning from places they were not sent. Depth becomes difficult to judge, and distances feel shorter or longer without consistency. It was during one of these fog events that the first reports emerged. A maintenance worker crossing the loch early in the morning noticed a shape ahead, standing on the far gate. The figure did not move or respond. As he stepped closer, the fog thinned just enough to reveal that no one was there. Similar sightings followed. Boaters waiting for the gates to open saw silhouettes standing on the lock gates or near the control mechanisms. These figures appeared upright and still, neither threatening nor welcoming. They did not gesture or speak. They simply stood, partially formed by the mist, then dissolved as the fog shifted. Witnesses noted a strange consistency. The figures always faced inward toward the chamber, never toward the waterway beyond. They appeared only during periods of heavy fog and vanished without sound. Cameras failed to capture them clearly, recording only vague shapes that could be dismissed as shadow and vapor. More unsettling were the effects on those who stared too long. Several individuals reported losing track of time while watching the fog. A moment spent observing the mist would stretch unexpectedly. Watches showed that minutes or even hours had passed, though the observer felt only a brief pause. One boater recalled entering the loch just after midday. Fog descended as the gates closed. He watched a figure form on the opposite gate, unmoving. When the fog cleared, the gates were open again. An evening light filled the chamber. His engine was cold. He could not account for the missing hours. Medical evaluations found nothing abnormal. Fatigue and stress were cited as contributing factors. Yet the reports continued, often from experienced workers familiar with long hours and night shifts. They insisted the sensation was not sleep or distraction, but a hollow gap where awareness should have been. Local history offered fragments that deepened the mystery. Before the canal was built, the valley was known for sudden ground fog that confused travelers. Old accounts described people arriving late to destinations without knowing why, convinced they had walked straight and true. Some believed the land itself bent perception. During construction of the loch, crews frequently paused work due to poor visibility, even on clear days. Progress slowed as fog settled unpredictably. Records show no serious accidents, but notes mention disorientation and repeated miscounts of time spent on site. Today, Fogfall Loch remains operational and closely monitored. Sensors track humidity, temperature, and air movement. Data confirms the unusual persistence of fog but offers no explanation for the figures or the lost time. Officials caution visitors not to linger during heavy mist, citing safety and navigation concerns. At night, the fog thickens more quickly. Lights cast shallow halos that fail to penetrate far. Within these glowing circles, the world feels smaller and oddly detached. Standing near the lock gates, one can sense a presence without seeing it, as though the fog itself is watching. Those who look too closely describe a subtle pull, not physical, but mental. The mind drifts toward stillness. It becomes easy to forget why one came or how long one has stood there. Only movement or sound seems to break the effect, restoring normal awareness. The figures, when they appear, do not approach. They remain fixed, aligned with the gates as if part of the structure itself. Some believe they represent echoes of those who once waited here, suspended between journeys, caught in moments where time slipped sideways. Whether Fogfall Loch alters perception or simply reveals a vulnerability already present remains unknown. What is certain is that the mist continues to gather, indifferent to explanation. It falls quietly, reshaping the space and those who stand within it. As water rises and falls behind the gates, the fog waits, patient and familiar. Travelers pass through, most unaware of anything unusual. But those who linger, who stare too long into the shifting white, often leave with a lingering sense that time is less stable than it seems. And that Fogfall Lock remembers every moment spent within its mist. Widowmaker Lock was carved into the earth during an era when speed mattered more than safety. The Canal Authority needed this passage completed quickly. Trade routes depended on it. Delays meant losses measured in cargo and reputation. Workers were brought in from nearby towns, many with little experience beyond basic stonework and digging. They labored beside the water from dawn until dusk, surrounded by damp walls and echoing chambers that swallowed sound. The ground beneath it was unstable, layered with soft sediment that shifted under weight. Water seeped through cracks faster than pumps could clear it. Temporary supports groaned under pressure. And scaffolding had to be rebuilt more than once. Still, work continued. Each delay was met with urgency, not caution. Accidents followed. A collapse along the chamber wall trapped several men before help could reach them. Another worker slipped from a narrow ledge and fell into the partially flooded lock below. Rescue attempts were slowed by darkness and the confined space. The water was drained, but it was too late. The deaths were recorded briefly, then buried beneath progress reports and construction schedules. The lock was completed and opened to traffic, but its reputation followed it. Workers refused assignments there unless they had no other choice. Boatmen passed through quickly, unwilling to linger in the tall stone chamber. The name Widowmaker Lock spread quietly, carried by those who knew its history. Today, the lock stands intact but unused, its gates fixed in place. Moss creeps along the stones. Rust stains mark old anchor points where equipment once hung. The water within the chamber is dark and still, disturbed only by falling leaves and the occasional ripple from underground flow. Visitors often remark on the feeling before they notice anything else. A sudden pressure settles on the chest, subtle at first, then heavier. Breathing feels shallow, as if the air has thickened. Some step back instinctively, surprised by the physical response to a place that appears calm and empty. Those who stay feel it more intensely. The chamber amplifies sound in strange ways. Water movement echoes upward, turning small disturbances into hollow reverberations. In that space, visitors report hearing strained breathing rising from below the surface. Slow. Uneven. Never loud enough to pinpoint. The sensation is not constant. It comes in waves, strongest near the center of the lock where the deepest water rests. People describe the urge to inhale deeply, only to find their lungs resisting, as if memory itself has weight. Researchers have offered explanations. Changes in air pressure within the stone chamber. Psychological suggestion tied to the lock's grim history. Natural acoustics created by water and enclosed space. Each theory explains part of the experience, but none account for how consistent the reports remain across time and visitors. Recording equipment often captures faint, irregular sounds when lowered near the water. They resemble breath but lack rhythm. Engineers dismiss them as water shifting through submerged channels beneath the lock floor, remnants of the construction era. Yet those who hear the recordings rarely feel reassured. The lock does not feel abandoned. Standing at the edge, visitors sense a presence below, not watching, not reaching, simply enduring. The water seems deeper than measurements suggest, its surface absorbing light rather than reflecting it. On overcast days, the chamber appears darker than the surrounding canal, as if shadow collects there deliberately. Old construction logs mention moments when workers refused to enter the chamber alone. They wrote of oppressive silence and a feeling of being pressed inward, as though the walls themselves leaned closer. These notes were marked as fatigue and ignored. The lock remained operational for decades, but incidents continued. Minor injuries. Sudden illnesses. A few unexplained falls that were blamed on missteps. Over time, traffic was redirected elsewhere, and Widowmaker Lock was left behind. Nature has softened its edges, but not its atmosphere. Birds avoid nesting within the chamber. Insects gather near the water but rarely cross its surface. During quiet hours, the canal around the lock feels alive, while the lock itself remains unnaturally still. Those who experience the pressure describe relief the moment they leave the area, as if an invisible weight lifts from their chest. Breathing returns to normal. Sounds fade back into their proper distances. Only then do they realize how tense they had become. Some return later, drawn by curiosity or disbelief. The sensation returns every time. Widowmaker Lock does not announce its history with signs or warnings. It does not display memorials or markers. Its story exists in feeling rather than fact, carried by the body before the mind can argue. The water below holds more than reflections. It carries echoes of effort, fear, and the final moments of those who worked too close to its edge. The chamber remembers the strain of lungs against water, the urgency of breath that never arrived. Visitors leave quietly, often without speaking. The lock remains where it has always been, patient and unchanged. Stone walls. Dark water. A space shaped by labor and loss. Some places record history in books and plaques. Others keep it suspended in the air, pressing gently against the chest, asking each person who enters to feel what was never finished, and what was never released. The canal bends gently before reaching Silent Bell Lock, where water slows and the banks rise slightly, forming a natural pause in the journey. By day, the place appears ordinary. Stonework shows its age. Moss clings to damp edges. The bell hangs above the lock, darkened and still, its surface worn smooth by time and weather. The bell was once essential. It rang to warn approaching boats, its sound carrying across water and stone to signal safe passage. Lock keepers relied on it. Crews listened for it. The canal moved by its rhythm, one crossing marked clearly from the next. Then the bell fell silent. No record explains exactly when it stopped being used. Some say newer signals replaced it. Others claim the rope snapped and was never repaired. Official notes are brief and practical. The bell is listed as inactive, unnecessary, decorative. Yet long after it was retired, the sound returned. It happens after midnight, when traffic fades and the canal settles into stillness. The first toll is often mistaken for imagination. A single low note, distant and uncertain, rising from the direction of the lock. Those who hear it pause, listening, waiting for confirmation. The second toll always comes. It is clearer. Closer. The sound rolls slowly across the water, heavy and deliberate. Instead, it seems to move, shifting position between each ring, as though carried forward step by step. Night watchmen were the first to report it officially. They noted the time, the weather, the absence of wind. They checked the bell housing and found the rope unmoved, the metal untouched. No mechanism explained the motion. The bell hung perfectly still. Still, the sound continued. Each toll feels nearer than the last. Not louder, but closer, as if the distance between listener and source is steadily closing. People describe a tightening sensation in the chest, a subtle instinct to step back from the water's edge. The canal itself remains calm. No wakes disturb the surface. No lights approach. The sound does not belong to any visible movement. It arrives alone, measured and patient. Those who remain by the lock during these nights notice another detail. The interval between tolls is uneven. Sometimes long enough to suggest the sound has ended. Sometimes brief, pressing, almost expectant. The bell does not follow the logic of timekeeping. It follows something else. Local stories began to form around the pattern. Some claim the bell rings only when no boats are present, as if searching for something missing. Others say it marks a passage unseen, signaling not vessels on water, but something traveling alongside it. A few insist the bell stops ringing when acknowledged. Turning toward the sound, focusing on it fully, seems to slow its approach. Ignoring it allows it to come closer. No one agrees on what closer truly means. There are reports of people hearing the bell from directly behind them, only to turn and find empty air. Others say the sound settles above the water, hovering just beyond sight. In rare cases, the final toll feels so near it vibrates through the bones, felt more than heard. Yet nothing ever appears. The lock gates do not move. The water does not rise or fall. The bell itself remains motionless, silhouetted against the dark sky, unchanged by the sound it produces. By dawn, the canal returns to normal. Morning light reveals no disturbance. Birds settle near the edges. Boats resume their routes. Those who heard the bell struggle to describe it clearly in daylight, as if the memory fades with the darkness. Some feel compelled to avoid the lock afterward. Others return deliberately, standing beneath the bell at night, waiting. Most do not stay long. Engineers have inspected the structure repeatedly. They find no faults. No hidden mechanisms. No unusual resonance. The bell should not ring. By all known rules, it cannot. Still, the sound persists. It is not nightly. It does not follow a schedule. It arrives without warning, rings with purpose, and then withdraws. The last toll is always the quietest, fading not into distance, but into absence. Those who hear it often report dreams afterward. Not of the bell itself, but of walking alongside water, matching their pace to an unseen presence. The feeling is not threatening. It is watchful. Intent. Silent bell lock remains open and functional. No signs warn of danger. No restrictions limit access. To most travelers, it is just another stop along the canal. But after dark, when the water stills and sound carries farther than it should, the bell remembers its role. It signals a passage. Not of boats, but of something that moves when no one is watching. Counting distance not in steps or time, but in attention. And with each toll, the sound draws closer. Reminding those who hear it that some warnings are not meant to be seen, only felt. As they approach quietly through the night. Driftwood Watch Lock rests where the water slows and bends, a place where currents hesitate before choosing a direction. The lock walls rise calmly from the canal, their surfaces worn smooth by years of passing flow. Birds settle along the edges during the day. The water reflects the sky with deceptive clarity. Yet something about this lock never feels settled. Debris gathers here in ways that defy expectation. Branches drift in from upstream and do not pass through. Logs turn slowly, then stop, as if caught by invisible hands. Smaller fragments weave together into dense clusters, twisting and locking into place. Workers clear the debris regularly, but by the next morning it has returned, rearranged into new shapes that feel deliberate rather than random. Old records describe the lock as a problem site from its earliest days. Water behaved unpredictably here. Floating matter refused to disperse. Even during strong flow, driftwood gathered tightly along the gate, pressing together until it formed thick barriers that resisted removal. Engineers adjusted angles and reinforced barriers, yet the patterns continued. Over time, the lock gained a reputation. At certain hours, especially near dusk, the gathered wood seems to change. Visitors standing along the edge notice shapes emerging within the tangle. Knots align into hollow sockets. Curved roots suggest cheekbones and brows. For a moment, faces appear within the driftwood, formed by shadow and grain. They are never clear and never complete. A blink is enough to make them vanish, dissolving back into broken branches and splintered ends. Most people dismiss the experience as imagination. The human mind seeks familiarity in chaos. It finds meaning where none exists. But those who remain watching begin to notice something else. The sensation does not come from the wood alone. It comes from everywhere at once. Standing near driftwood watch lock produces a strange awareness. The feeling of being observed arrives without warning, subtle but insistent. It is not the sense of a single presence, but many. Attention seems to press in from behind, from the water, from the far bank. Turning does nothing to relieve it. Each direction feels equally watched. The lock itself appears unchanged during these moments. Gates remain still. Water continues its slow movement. But the driftwood shifts almost imperceptibly, rotating just enough to catch the light differently. Shadows deepen within the pile, creating the impression of depth where there should be none. Local maintenance crews speak carefully about the site. They avoid clearing debris alone. And rarely linger after sunset. Tools left on the platform sometimes end up closer to the edge than where they were set down. Footsteps echo oddly, overlapping as if more than one person is walking. When asked, the crews blame acoustics and fatigue. Yet their habits suggest otherwise. Scientists studying water flow have attempted to explain the patterns. Eddies form where currents meet resistance. Objects collect where forces cancel each other out. In theory, driftwood watch lock is simply an ideal trap for floating debris. In theory, perception fills in the rest. But theory does not explain why the faces appear only here. Nor does it explain why the sensation of being watched intensifies when the debris reaches a certain density. Visitors report the feeling growing stronger as the driftwood thickens, as if the wood itself is becoming aware of those nearby. Some experience a tightening in the chest. Others feel the urge to leave without understanding why. At night, the lock transforms entirely. Moonlight catches on wet wood, turning pale surfaces into sharp highlights. Reflections fracture across the water, breaking faces apart and reassembling them again. The silence feels layered, filled with distant movement that never fully resolves into sound. Those who stand too long begin to lose track of where their attention should rest. Every direction feels equally important. Every shadow demands notice. Some claim that the driftwood watches back. Historians note that the lock sits near an old convergence of waterways. Long before modern construction, debris gathered here naturally, carried from multiple directions. Objects from far upstream met fragments from nearby banks. Over centuries, the water learned this habit. The lock merely reinforced it. Perhaps driftwood watch lock does not create watchers, but collects them. Every branch has traveled. Every log has struck banks, bridges, and unseen obstacles. Each carries marks of impact and time. The human mind reads those layers as faces, as presence, as attention. And yet, even understanding this brings little comfort when standing alone at the edge. The sensation builds quietly. Awareness stretching outward, then folding back in. The feeling that leaving unnoticed is not guaranteed. Many visitors depart without looking back, resisting the urge to confirm what they feel. By morning, the lock appears harmless again. Debris sits motionless. Faces are gone. The water flows as expected. Crews arrive and begin the slow process of clearing what has gathered overnight. As the current carries new fragments toward it, the patterns begin again. Branches turn. Logs settle. Shapes emerge. And the lock resumes its silent observation, watching from many directions at once, waiting for those who are willing to notice. The lock known as Black Ledger rests in a quiet stretch of canal where the water darkens long before sunset. Its stone walls rise higher than most, heavy and uneven, as if added to over many years. Moss clings to every seam, and iron fixtures show layers of repair that never fully erased what came before. Only when standing near it does its weight become apparent. From a distance, the lock appears ordinary. Official records describe this place as functional, efficient, and well managed. Dates are logged. Cargo movements are listed. Accidents are mentioned briefly, reduced to numbers and short notes. Yet those who have studied the archives closely notice gaps. Names missing from expected sequences. Totals that do not match surrounding years. Pages that appear newer than the rest, inserted where something else once existed. The canal was once a lifeline for nearby settlements. Barges moved day and night, carrying goods, tools, and people. Crews worked long hours, navigating narrow passages by lantern light. Mist often settled over the water, blurring edges and softening sound. It was during these years of constant motion that the lock earned its reputation. People fell into the water here more often than elsewhere. Some slipped while handling lines. Others misjudged the edge in poor light. A few were never seen again, their absence noted only by unfinished entries in the logbooks. Over time, locals began to refer to the records kept at the lock as incomplete. The term Black Ledger emerged quietly, spoken more often than written. A tally carried by the place itself. The water inside the lock is unusually still. Even when boats pass through nearby stretches, the surface here resists disturbance. Reflections settle quickly, creating a dark mirror that shows less sky than expected. Looking down gives the impression of depth without detail, as though the water refuses to reveal what lies beneath. As evening falls, sound behaves differently around the lock. Footsteps along the towpath seem muted, absorbed by the stone. Voices carry farther, yet lose clarity. Words blur into low murmurs that echo briefly, then fade. It is during these moments that the whispers begin. They arrive softly, barely distinguishable from wind or shifting water. At first they seem random, fragments of sound without meaning. With time, patterns emerge. The whispers form names. Some are old, unfamiliar, drawn from a past no longer present. Others are common, easily recognized. Those standing near the lock often dismiss the sounds at first. The mind searches for explanations. Water moving through hidden channels. Air passing through cracks in the stone. Distant voices carried by the canal. Yet the whispers persist, repeating with subtle variation, as if testing for recognition. The most unsettling reports come from those who hear something unmistakable. Their own name, spoken clearly, quietly, and without urgency. It does not echo. It does not repeat loudly. It simply exists, placed into the air as if it belongs there. The water appears closer, smoother, and more inviting. The urge to step forward does not feel forced. It feels reasonable, almost necessary. Those who experience this sensation describe a strange calm. Fear does not dominate the moment. Instead, there is a sense of alignment, as though something unfinished waits just beyond the surface. Awareness of balance and distance fades, replaced by focus on the water below. Many break the spell by stepping back or leaving the area entirely. The whispers stop almost immediately. The lock returns to silence, and the pull weakens with distance. Others require interruption, a voice calling to them, a sudden noise, a physical touch that restores perspective. No official document addresses these experiences. Modern inspections list the lock as stable, safe, and structurally sound. Warning signs mention slippery edges and deep water, nothing more. The gaps in the historical record remain unexplained. At night, the lock feels larger than it appears during the day. Shadows fill the recesses of the stonework, and the water absorbs what little light remains. The whispers continue whether anyone listens or not, threading through the darkness with patience. Some believe the names spoken are those left unrecorded, lives lost without acknowledgement. Others think the lock repeats what it hears, collecting identities from every passerby. There is no agreement, only shared unease. Leaving Black Ledger Lock creates a noticeable release. Sounds return to normal. The canal resumes its familiar rhythm. The weight of attention lifts, and the urge fades into memory. Looking back offers no confirmation that anything unusual occurred. In daylight, the lock is simply a structure of stone and iron, marked by age and use. The water reflects clouds and passing birds. Nothing stirs beneath the surface. Yet the records remain incomplete, and the names unheard during the day wait for evening. Black Ledger Lock does not announce its history. It does not warn or pursue. It keeps its account quietly, balancing numbers that never reached the page. For those who stand too close and listen too carefully, the water remembers more than the books ever did. The lock of the lost passage exists in records, photographs, and memories, yet its exact position refuses to settle. Maps place it along different stretches of the canal depending on the edition, sometimes miles apart. Coordinates entered into navigation systems drift slightly with each update, as if the land itself resists being fixed to a single point. Travelers approaching the lock often describe a subtle uncertainty before they ever see it. Roads feel familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Landmarks appear later than expected, or not at all. Then, without a clear sense of transition, the lock is simply there, stone walls rising from the water as though they have always been part of the view. What troubles visitors most is not the arrival, but the absence of memory surrounding it. People report stepping out of vehicles or boats with no recollection of the final stretch of their journey. Conversations fade from recall. Turns taken minutes earlier dissolve into blank space. The mind offers no alarm, only a quiet acceptance that something has been skipped. Engineers who studied the lock describe it as structurally sound and unremarkable. Its gates function smoothly. The water level responds as designed. Yet maintenance logs reveal an odd pattern. Crews consistently underestimate the time spent reaching the site. Return trips take longer than expected, even when retracing the same path at the same speed. Boaters passing through the lock experience a similar distortion. The approach feels brief, almost effortless. Distances stretch. Fuel consumption increases slightly, though currents remain steady. Some report a growing sense of fatigue, not physical, but mental, as though concentration is slowly being drained. Local residents have learned to give vague directions. They point toward the canal and advise travelers to watch carefully. Many refuse to guide visitors back the way they came, saying only that the path will reveal itself when it is ready. These statements are delivered without humor or drama, as accepted truths rather than warnings. Historical records offer fragments that deepen the mystery. Early surveyors argued over the placement of the canal in this region. Measurements conflicted. Chains stretched and contracted unexpectedly. One journal notes that distances walked in the morning did not match those walked in the afternoon. The lock was built anyway, anchoring the route through terrain that never fully agreed with itself. Over time, stories accumulated. Travelers arrived at nearby towns unable to recall the lock at all, despite passing through it hours earlier. Others remembered it vividly but could not find it again when they tried to return. Maps marked with careful notes led only to quiet stretches of water where nothing stood. Those who linger at the lock describe a peculiar stillness. Sound carries poorly. Water movement seems delayed, as if responding a moment after it should. Standing on the path beside the canal, one may feel the sense of being between places rather than at a destination. The most consistent report concerns the path away. Leaving the lock always feels longer than arriving. Steps multiply. Corners repeat. Familiar markers appear farther apart. Travelers glance back and find the lock already obscured, not by distance, but by a subtle refusal of the landscape to frame it clearly. Some attempt to measure the phenomenon. Timers are set. Distances are tracked. Results vary wildly. A walk that should take 10 minutes stretches to 30. Another ends abruptly at a road that was not there before. No two accounts align perfectly, yet all agree on the imbalance between arrival and departure. Psychologists suggest dissociation brought on by monotony and expectation. Geographers point to minor mapping errors compounded over time. These explanations account for parts of the experience, but not the shared sense of having crossed something unseen. Many describe it as passing through a narrow opening that closes once you step beyond it. At dusk, the lock grows quieter than its surroundings. Light fades unevenly. Shadows stretch in directions that do not match the setting sun. Water reflects the sky imperfectly, as though the surface is remembering an earlier hour. Those who stand there long enough report a gentle pressure, not physical, but directional. Not physical, but directional. It does not push or pull, but suggests movement. The mind begins to consider leaving, even without reason. Staying feels unnecessary, even unwise, though no danger presents itself. A few individuals have attempted to remain overnight. All left before morning. None could clearly explain why. They spoke of restlessness, of an urge to keep moving. Of the sense that remaining still would cause something important to be missed. Despite its reputation, the Lock of the Lost Passage continues to serve its function. Boats rise and fall. Water moves on schedule. The structure holds firm. It is the experience of passing through that unsettles, not the mechanism itself. Perhaps the lock marks a place where routes overlap imperfectly, where movement does not align cleanly with memory. Or perhaps it simply reveals how easily direction can slip when attention falters. Those who leave eventually find their way back to familiar ground, though the journey often feels longer than it should. Time resumes its normal rhythm. Distances make sense again. Yet many carry a lingering doubt, a sense that not all paths are equal in both directions. Somewhere along the canal, the Lock of the Lost Passage waits, unbothered by disagreement. It allows entry freely, without demand or sign. But departure requires patience, and perhaps a willingness to accept that not every crossing can be remembered, only felt, as the land quietly rearranges the way forward. Moonspill Lock sits on a quiet section of canal where the banks are low and the water moves slowly, as if it has learned to conserve its strength. By day, it looks ordinary. Stone walls worn smooth by time. A chamber that holds still water and scattered leaves. If you pass in sunlight, there is nothing to suggest the lock is different from any other forgotten stretch of canal. But locals do not speak about it in daylight. They wait until evening, when the sky turns pale and the first stars appear. Then they mention the moonlight, and how it behaves here as if it belongs to another world. On clear nights, the moon rises and lays a silver path across the canal. In most places, that reflection is steady, a clean stripe that breaks only when ripples disturb it. At Moonspill Lock, the light does not settle. It twists. It bends. It looks as though it is being pulled sideways by something under the surface. People who watch closely describe it as a slow distortion, like glass warping in heat. The reflection stretches and folds back on itself. It forms angles where water should be smooth. It creates the illusion that the canal is deeper than it is, that the lock chamber drops into a dark hollow and the moonlight is spilling down into it. The first recorded story comes from a night watchman assigned to the canal during a period of heavy theft and vandalism. He walked the towpath during full moons to deter trespassers. One night, he stopped at the lock and noticed the moon's reflection breaking into strange shapes, like scattered shards of silver moving across the surface. He leaned closer, believing someone was in the water. And then he saw figures. They rose slowly, waist deep, where the chamber is deepest. Human outlines without clear faces, pale in the moonlight, still as statues. They did not climb out. They did not swim. They simply appeared, as if lifted by the water itself, suspended in a silent pause between rising and leaving. The watchman later wrote that he felt no fear at first, only a heavy confusion, like waking from a dream and realizing you are still inside it. Then clouds passed over the moon. In that instant, the figures vanished. No splash. No movement. No fading. One moment they were there, and the next the water was empty and dark, as if nothing had ever broken its surface. He returned the next night, and the next full moon after that. Each time, the same pattern repeated. When moonlight was strong and uninterrupted, the reflection bent and spilled in unnatural ways. When he watched long enough, shapes rose from the canal. When clouds covered the moon, the canal returned to ordinary darkness. Over the years, others reported the same thing. Barge crews claimed they saw silhouettes rising within the lock chamber while passing nearby on calm, bright nights. Fishermen spoke of quiet human forms standing in the water, facing the bank as if waiting for permission to step forward. A few late-night walkers described seeing multiple figures at once, spaced evenly, as though arranged for a purpose only the canal understood. The figures never crossed the edge. They do not reach toward visitors. They do not speak. They do not gesture. Their stillness is what unsettles people most, because it feels deliberate. Like a memory replayed with perfect restraint. Moonspill Lock has its own history, and the canal authorities do not like to discuss it. Long ago, the lock was part of a busy route connecting small towns that relied on water transport. During one winter, the canal froze unevenly. Ice formed thick sheets upstream, then broke suddenly under rising pressure. The surge moved like a slow avalanche, pushing shattered ice into the lock chamber. Boats trapped inside were crushed against the stone. Men tried to cut lines and escape, but the lock walls offered nowhere to run. When the ice finally broke apart, the canal carried debris for miles. The disaster was never commemorated publicly. Trade continued. Repairs were made. The lock returned to service. But those who witnessed the aftermath said the water here did not look the same afterward. It seemed darker. The chamber held cold longer than surrounding stretches. Even in summer, the air above the lock felt faintly chilled after sunset. Some believe the figures are tied to that night. Not as restless spirits in the dramatic sense, but as impressions, replaying in moonlight like an old photograph that appears only under the right conditions. The full moon provides enough light to reveal what the daytime hides. Clouds erase it, like a hand wiping a window clean. Scientists and skeptics have visited Moonspill Lock to explain the distortion. They point to angles of the stone walls, the stillness of the chamber, the way moonlight can reflect differently when water is layered with thin film or temperature gradients. They mention optical effects, drifting mist, and the mind's tendency to find shapes in darkness. But these explanations falter when witnesses agree on the same details. The figures rise to the waist. They remain still. They vanish instantly when the moon is covered. The reflection bends even when the water is calm. Those who have stood at the edge of the lock during a full moon describe the feeling as being observed from below, not by eyes, but by presence. The canal is quiet, yet the silence is full, as if the air has been filled with waiting. Some people test the story by shining bright lights onto the water. The distortion weakens. The silver spill breaks apart. The figures do not appear. It is as if the lock requires only the moon, and nothing else, to reveal what it holds. Then clouds move away, moonlight returns, and the reflection begins to twist again. Moonspill Lock remains untouched, avoided by locals who know its rhythm. They do not camp nearby on full moon nights. They do not stand too long at the chamber's edge. They treat the place with quiet respect, not because it threatens, but because it offers something that feels like a glimpse into a moment that should have stayed hidden. When the moon is bright and the sky is clear, the canal looks like polished metal. And in that silver spill, the lock remembers. Figures rise waist deep, motionless and pale, shaped by light and water and time. Clouds pass overhead, and everything is gone. Only dark water remains, moving slowly through stone, carrying the night forward as if nothing happened at all. Gatekeeper's Rest Lock lies along a quiet stretch of canal where the water slows and the banks rise gently, forming a natural bend that feels set apart from the rest of the route. The lock house stands close to the water, a narrow stone shelter with a small staircase leading to a single wooden door. For decades, a lone gatekeeper lived there. He worked the lock alone, opening and closing the gates with careful precision, guiding boats through in all seasons. Records describe him as reliable and reserved, a man who preferred routine to conversation. His days followed the rhythm of water levels and passing vessels, his nights spent listening to the canal settle into stillness. When he died, there was no immediate replacement. Traffic had slowed, automation was being discussed, and the shelter was locked and left behind. The lock continued to function, but the house remained empty, its door sealed, its steps unused. That should have been the end of it. The first sounds were noticed by a night patrol making routine rounds. As they passed the lock, they heard footsteps climbing the stone stairs of the shelter. The sound was steady and deliberate, each step placed with familiarity. Expecting to find a trespasser, the patrol approached, only to see the building dark and silent. The footsteps stopped at the door. Then the door opened. It creaked inward, just enough to break the seal of silence, before closing again with a muted thud. No light appeared inside. No movement followed. The lock house stood exactly as it had before. Assuming a trick of temperature or old hinges, the patrol noted the incident and moved on. The next night, the same sounds were heard again. Footsteps. The pause at the top of the stairs. The door opening and closing, always once, always calmly. Word spread among those who worked the canal at night. Some dismissed it. Others avoided the area after dark. A few stayed to watch. From a distance, the pattern remained consistent. The footsteps always began at the base of the stairs, never elsewhere. The door never slammed. It opened as if someone expected to enter, then closed as if the task was complete. Those who stood closer noticed smaller details. The footsteps sounded heavier near the bottom, lighter near the top. The door handle moved smoothly, not tugged or shaken. The action felt practiced, habitual, as if repeating a duty learned long ago. Inside the shelter, nothing moved. Dust lay undisturbed. The air remained stale and cold. No marks appeared on the floor. No signs of occupation followed the sounds. The canal itself responded subtly. Water near the lock would ripple faintly during the footsteps, settling again when the door closed. The lock gates did not move, but the mechanisms sometimes clicked softly, as if testing their balance. Some began to believe the gatekeeper never truly left. Old notes reveal that he lived alone for many years, rarely taking time away from the lock. His shelter was both home and workplace, its stairs worn smooth by his daily routine. When he died, it was said he was found seated near the window, facing the canal, as though waiting for the next boat. Those who hear the footsteps often describe a feeling of order rather than fear. The sounds do not rush or linger. They follow a schedule that feels internal, not tied to clocks or calendars. There are nights when the footsteps stop halfway up the stairs. On those occasions, the door does not open. The air grows still, and the canal seems to wait. Eventually, the steps resume and finish their climb, restoring the pattern. No one has seen a figure on the stairs. No shadow crosses the door. The presence announces itself only through sound, as if sight is unnecessary. A few visitors have tried calling out during the footsteps. Their voices carry across the water, but receive no reply. The sounds continue unchanged, indifferent to attention. It is as though the routine exists outside interaction. At dawn, the lock house returns to complete silence. The door remains closed. The stairs lie empty. Day crews find nothing disturbed, nothing altered. The canal resumes its ordinary flow. Engineers have inspected the shelter repeatedly. Hinges are old but stable. Wood is dry. Those who pass the lock at night sometimes feel compelled to slow their pace, matching the rhythm of the steps. Others report an unexpected sense of reassurance, as if someone is still watching the water, ensuring its order. Gatekeeper's rest lock remains in use, quietly functioning as it always has. Boats pass through without incident. The shelter stands empty by all visible measures. But every night, when the canal grows still and the world listens less closely, the stairs are climbed once more. The door opens. The door closes. And the lock, tended by memory and routine, rests under the watch of a gatekeeper who never stopped coming home. Sunken cargo lock lies along a stretch of water that appears calm even in bad weather. The surface rarely ripples, and the banks slope gently toward the gate. During the day, it looks like a place built for patience. A place where heavy loads move slowly and nothing happens without warning. That calm has always been misleading. Years ago, a fully loaded barge entered the lock near dusk. The cargo was secured. The water level stable. The crew experienced. There was no storm, no collision, no clear reason for concern. Then it began to sink. Not suddenly, not violently, but with quiet determination. The bow dipped first, barely noticeable. The stern followed. Within moments, water poured over the deck, and the vessel settled lower than it ever should have. Alarms were raised. Lines were thrown. Gates were halted. But the weight pulled downward with steady force, and the barge slipped beneath the surface as if guided. By the time the water stilled, nothing remained visible. Investigations followed. Inspections found no breach in the lock walls. No failure in the gates. No obvious damage to the barge itself. The cargo manifest listed nothing hazardous or unstable. The sinking was attributed to an unknown structural weakness, and the site was cleared for operation again. Officially, the incident was closed. But sunken cargo lock never returned to normal. At night, the water changes character. Reflections sharpen, as if the surface is thinner than elsewhere. Lights from the shore stretch downward instead of across, drawn into dark shapes below. Those standing near the edge notice a faint outline forming beneath the surface, especially when the moon is high. The long body of a vessel appears just below the waterline, suspended where it should not be. Edges emerge in pale contrast. A deck, a railing, a cargo hold sealed in shadow. The outline never breaks the surface, yet it remains visible long enough to be recognized before dissolving again into darkness. Some nights, the outline returns repeatedly, each time clearer than before. Sound accompanies the sight. Long after midnight, when the lock stands inactive, soft metallic clinks echo across the water. The noise is gentle and rhythmic, like chains brushing against steel. It carries easily in the quiet air, drifting from the center of the lock chamber. Maintenance crews confirm that no chains are suspended in the water. No equipment should be moving. And yet the sound persists. Those who listen closely describe it as effort rather than motion. A repeated test of weight. A slow pull that never completes. Standing nearby produces an odd physical response. The ground seems to vibrate faintly beneath the feet, not enough to be alarming, but enough to be noticed. Some feel pressure in their ears, as if descending underwater while remaining on land. The sensation rises through the soles and lingers in the legs. The vibration rises through the soles and lingers in the legs. Divers have examined the site during daylight. They report poor visibility and unusual currents near the bottom of the lock. Sediment shifts constantly, refusing to settle. Attempts to locate the remains of the barge have failed. Equipment detects irregular shapes that vanish upon closer inspection. Each dive ends the same way, with the sense that something is just out of reach. Engineers explain that locks can trap pressure beneath their floors. Weight pressing down creates pockets of resistance, altering flow in subtle ways. Over time, heavy objects can sink into layers of silt, becoming effectively invisible. In theory, the barge rests buried, its outline an illusion caused by reflection and memory. In theory. Visitors who return multiple times notice patterns. The outline appears more often on the anniversary of the sinking. The chain sounds grow louder when the water level is adjusted. On nights when the lock is completely still, the clinking becomes slower, more deliberate. As if whatever lies below is gathering strength. There is no panic associated with the sight. No sudden fear. Instead, the atmosphere encourages quiet observation. People speak softly without realizing it. Footsteps slow. Conversations fade. The lock draws attention downward, toward the dark water that seems deeper than it should be. Some report feeling watched, not from the surface, but from below. The sensation is subtle, like awareness rising upward rather than eyes looking outward. Others feel a pull toward the edge, not strong enough to cause movement, but persistent enough to demand caution. Historians note that sunken cargo lock was built over an older channel, one used heavily before modern construction redirected traffic. Barges, debris, and silt accumulated here long before the current structure existed. The lock did not create the depth. It simply concentrated it. Perhaps the barge found a place already prepared to receive it. As dawn approaches, the outline fades completely. The water resumes its ordinary appearance. The chain sounds stop. Daylight erases the depth, flattening the surface into harmless reflection. Workers arrive, unaware of what the night revealed. Yet the lock remains. Sunken cargo lock continues to function as designed, lifting and lowering vessels with quiet efficiency. But beneath the surface, something rests where it should not. A shape remembered by water. A weight that did not finish sinking. And when night returns, the lock listens. Chains clink softly. The outline forms once more. And for those who stand still long enough, it feels as though something below is not waiting to be found, but waiting to rise. The lock known as Last Current sits where the canal narrows and then simply ends. Stone walls taper into reeds and silt, and beyond them the channel dissolves into marsh and shadow. Maps mark this place with a faint line that stops without explanation. The towpath fades the same way, its gravel thinning into grass, as if the land itself decided the canal had gone far enough. Once, this stretch carried barges toward distant markets. Water moved steadily, guided by gates and careful timing. When trade shifted and maintenance stopped, the final section was left to itself. The lock remained, holding a position without purpose, guarding a passage no longer used. The most unsettling detail reveals itself only after time spent watching the water. Instead of flowing onward, the surface draws inward. Leaves drift toward the center from every direction. Ripples bend back against themselves. Even after rainfall, when upstream levels rise, the motion here resists release, as if the lock gathers water rather than passing it along. Engineers who visited decades later found no clear explanation. Channels beneath the stone appeared ordinary. Gates were sealed and fixed in place. Yet the inward pull persisted, subtle but constant. Instruments showed movement where none should exist. Notes were taken, then filed away. And the canal was left to quiet neglect once more. Approaching the lock brings a feeling of arrival that is difficult to define. The air feels still, insulated from the breeze that moves the surrounding grasses. Sound dulls slightly, as though absorbed by the stone. Footsteps on the towpath lose their echo and seem to stop sooner than expected. Visitors often linger longer than planned. The place invites pause, not through beauty or comfort, but through a sense of completion. The canal does not continue, and neither does the path. Standing here feels like reaching the end of a sentence that never finished. As daylight fades, the inward flow becomes easier to notice. Reflections tilt toward the center of the lock chamber. Floating debris traces slow arcs that never break outward. The water remains calm, without splashing or turbulence, yet its direction is unmistakable. It is during these hours that voices are sometimes reported. They do not shout or command. They arrive gently, layered beneath the sounds of insects and distant wind. At first they seem like thoughts mistaken for sound, a familiar tone without clear words. With time, the voices gain shape. They speak softly, encouraging stillness. The message feels reassuring, promising relief from effort and movement. Listeners describe a sense of being understood, as though the lock recognizes fatigue carried from far beyond the canal. The voices do not threaten. They do not rush. They suggest staying, resting, letting go of the need to move forward. The water, drawing inward, appears to support this idea, its surface smooth and undisturbed. Its surface smooth and undisturbed, reflecting a sky that seems closer than it should be. Those who hear the voices often experience a deep calm mixed with uncertainty. The edge of the lock becomes a focal point. Sounds from behind feel distant, less important. Time stretches, making minutes feel unmeasured and uncounted. Some step back instinctively, breaking the effect. Others remain, listening until the voices fade on their own. The experience leaves no physical trace, only a lingering impression that something offered comfort in an unfamiliar form. The history of the canal adds weight to these moments. This final stretch was abandoned gradually, crews reassigned, routes redirected. At night, the place feels enclosed despite the open sky. Darkness gathers around the lock, deepening the inward draw of the water. The marsh beyond absorbs light, offering no clear continuation. The canal feels like a held breath, suspended between use and forgetting. Those who leave after sunset often describe relief mixed with reluctance. Walking away restores normal sound and motion. The breeze returns. The path widens slightly, becoming a trail again. Looking back shows nothing unusual, only stone and still water. In daylight, Last Current Lock appears quiet and unremarkable. The inward flow is harder to see. Birds rest along the stones. Sunlight breaks across the surface in familiar patterns. The voices are absent, replaced by ordinary sounds of nature. Yet the sense of finality remains. This is not a place of passage but of conclusion. The canal does not invite onward travel here. It gathers what reaches it and holds on. Gently, persistently. It does not pursue or trap. Its influence is subtle, offering rest where movement once mattered most. It reflects a time when the canal's purpose ended, and the water learned a new direction. Last Current Lock stands as a reminder that some endings are quiet. They do not announce themselves with force or drama. They wait, drawing inward, offering stillness to those who pause long enough to listen, before allowing them to leave and carry the memory away. Thank you for drifting through the haunted canal locks of New York with me tonight. These waterways once carried dreams, labor, and ambition. But they also absorbed loss, fear, and unfinished stories. The locks still stand, patient and silent, holding memories in stone and water. Some who visit feel watched. Some leave with whispers echoing in their minds. And some say the canals follow them home, appearing in dreams where gates slowly close and the water keeps rising. If you ever find yourself near a quiet canal after dark, pause and listen. The water may be speaking. Would you dare to stand alone beside a haunted lock at midnight, or would you turn away before the current pulls you in? Rest well, my friend. Until our next haunted journey.